radical Republican. He will never be talked about like that, but he was. And it goes right back to his family life and his birth. So Michael Collins was born in 1890 in Clonakilty in West Cork. His dad was 75 years old when he was born. So there's hope for all of us lads. He was actually so old that he was in his 30s during the Great Irish Famine, which radicalised him and made him a Fenian, and later a member of the IRB. And of course, Michael Collins later became the leader of the IRB. Now, the IRB, as you possibly know, is an organisation that kind of sees itself as above and apart from the rest of what's going on, including the political factions going on at the time. And they would have believed at the time, and Michael Collins would be the legitimate president of Ireland. And this carries on. But the famine didn't just radicalise Collins' father, because his own grandfather was so old, he was actually in the United Irishmen. So Michael Collins' grandfather is one of the United Irishmen who fought at one of the only engagements in Cork during 1798 rebellion, the Battle of the Big Cross. So Michael Collins' Republican legacy goes back to the IRB, to the Fenians, and even to the United Irishmen, that great group that started it all of Protestants, Catholics, and dissenters, unhappy with the empire and wanting to set up a country devoid of all dissensions, devoid of religious distinction or denomination. So this presentation we have of Collins as being kind of an accountant type who would have loved vulture funds and wanted to retire to the Burnaby with Kitty Kiernan is all rubbish. He was a radical Republican and wanted a radical Republic. He moves to London in 1906, moves in with his sister Annie and starts working in the telecommunications network of the British Empire. But in 1909, at only 19 years of age, he is sworn into the IRB by none other than Sam Maguire, the Protestant Republican, yes, whom the club is named after. And after that, he begins an incredible life of espionage and basically spying on the British establishment. 6 years before the Easter Rising, Michael Collins is hanging out in social circles among his sister's friends, including Moyle Llewellyn-Davies, her husband Crompton Llewellyn-Davies, who was his boss in the post office, but who was also best friend and election agent for one David Lloyd George. In other words, at 20 years of age, Michael Collins is marking his opposite number because he himself became the Minister of Finance in the first Dáil, and he is marking the man who's running the British Empire. This is an incredible level of penetration. Years before the Easter Rising, we're presented this idea of Collins as some kind of country boy who, because he was good at a bit of calculus, managed to bring the British negotiating table after 700 years. Nothing could be further from the truth. He's far more like James Bond. And he'll do anything, in or out of bed, to free Ireland. As would I. But it is incredible, folks, because for all that work that goes on, he takes part in the Easter Rising and all of that, and at that young age, he's made Minister for Finance in the very first Dáil, which met here. And this Dáil, of course, when we talk about legitimacy, is quite interesting, because a 32 county election is held, yes, under first past the post, but Sinn Féin do garner about 47% of the vote, and that is legitimate government of the state. They always say that nobody knew what Collins looked like, his picture's up there. But of course, they're all there. Which is very weird what happens afterwards when it comes to the second Dáil, and this is something that I think people haven't looked at, and historians especially don't want to look at, which is this fact, that the Government of Ireland Act of 1920 divided the country long before the Anglo-Irish Treaty into the Parliament of Northern Ireland and the Parliament of Southern Ireland. And an election is held on the 24th of May, 1921. It's not held. Basically, Sinn Féin run uncontested. There's not even an election, but they return 124 TDs. They've taken the entire government except for 4 unionist TDs. But the problem is they've done it under the aegis of the Parliament of Southern Ireland. And I believe that this is a time when Sinn Féin it was too hard to resist to get this all-powerful government. But the problem is, by accepting the limits of Southern Ireland itself, they then accepted partition in everything but name. It's very hard to go and negotiate to not have partition when you've already accepted it as a fact on the ground. And this is where there's a kind of a split, I think, theoretically, with a lot of people between the legitimacy of the first Dáil and then the legitimacy of any Dáil after that. Now, of course, people will always say that there are questions about this and the people that voted since and all the rest of it. But you see, were they asked if this was the legitimate thing? And so these things are questions that we will ponder for a long time and forever, but it's definitely legitimate to say that as soon as Sinn Féin accepted the parameters of the Government of Ireland Act, that it was no longer, they had separated from the legitimacy of the first Dáil. And that's just a theoretical thing, but I'm sure you've all pondered yourselves. I'm going to go forward. Oh, there we are, yes. So, when the Anglo-Irish Treaty does come to being, we're famously told in the Michael Collins movie, you know that movie where everything in it is a lie, including the words and but. But we're told that De Valera told Collins to go over, like Collins was some kind of foot soldier. But of course, the reason Collins has to be the man that is talked to by Lloyd George is because he's actually the leader of Ireland. Because the British establishment know that the IRB is the actual leadership and that De Valera is merely the figurehead of Sinn Féin, the elected government. But Michael Collins is really the man you talk to. It would be like in the Good Friday Agreement, only talking to Gerry Adams and not talking to Martin McGuinness, who's really the main guy. And so that is why Collins was asked over. But again, our history is full of these kind of gentle massages of things and these stories that grow that are untrue. Collins was actually a very important figure, but we've been told that he was basically subservient and basically just a desk jockey running a bit of intelligence and stuff like that. No, he was the main man, as the IRB was really the main organisation. There is, of course, a vote on the treaty in the IRB. It's so secretive we don't even know all the people that were in it, but we know certainly that Michael Collins got the main support for the treaty. But why is that? Because he had another plan. And of course, freedom to achieve freedom and the stepping stone theory have been told to us as some kind of constitutional thing, that Collins was going to wait till we legitimately, constitutionally did things, and nothing could be further from the truth. Collins had a military plan. But why did Collins have such a military plan for the North all through 1922? He wanted to invade the North. What's going on? Why is this? Well, A, he was concerned with something huge. Very rare for a Cork person, by the way, no offence to any Cork people here, to actually know where the 6 counties are. Most Cork people think there's Cork, and then everywhere else is north of Cork. And those pink counties, they're just called Here Be Dragons. He has no idea what they are. You know the type of Cork person I mean?
Yeah.
One of them was self-isolating in Joe Biden's garden there during COVID. Remember that fella? He called himself Taoiseach for a while. You know them type of Cork people. Well, Michael Collins was not that type of Cork person. He was actually very concerned about what happened in the North, and every cabinet meeting he has during that time is to do with that. And the reason being is not just because of the huge refugee situation and the pogroms going on in the North, the civil war that was taking place, but because there's a vast military force in the North, 15,000 armed policemen, B specials, 35,000 British troops, many who had just left from here and gone north. And they're all under the leadership of a man called Henry Wilson, who's an irredentist unionist, who basically says, I have 50,000 troops, Collins is only allowed 4,000 under the treaty. We were only allowed 4,000 national troops under the treaty. It could have taken us in the morning, 10 to 1. So what does Collins do? He instigates a plan to invade the North all through 1922. You're not allowed to be told this, though, by our historians, by our establishment, by our TV. No, Collins was purely constitutional, working on the Constitution. Of course he was. He had the ballot box in one hand and the Tommy gun in the other. And why did he need to do this? Because he knew that these guys could invade at any moment. Now, unfortunately, he's sending the arms up, completely collaborating with the anti-treaty side in the Four Courts, when, unfortunately, there's a split in the IRA in the Four Courts, and they want to go straight away. Joe McKelvey and them want to go straight away to take the North. Collins says, no, you can't. Liam Lynch agrees with him. He's saying you can't. We're not ready yet. Whatever happens on the 22nd of June, Henry Wilson is assassinated on the streets of Dublin by the London IRA, substitute London IRB, under the orders of Sam Maguire. Many people have said Collins didn't do this. He had nothing to do with it. He's the only one who could have had anything to do with it. Either way, Collins is now in a rock and a hard place, because Churchill has played the anti-treaty side in the Four Courts, and now either they, the British, resume the Anglo-Irish War and take out the Four Courts, or Collins has to. We never know if Collins gives the order. But either way, Emmett Dalton, a man who's always there when things go right, heads down with two 18-pounder guns and the Civil War begins. It's not good. And yet, Collins is allowed now to grow his army to almost 50,000. Even in July 24th, 1922, he's still saying to people like W.T. Cosgrave, we now have a force that means something in future dealings with Britain in the northeast. Collins is a militarist who knows that the only solution to the Six County problem is going to be a military one. And this is why I believe he dies. He's got a target on his head from all sorts of people. The anti-treaty side think that he stabbed him in the back and launched the attack on the forecourt, so we've never known if he really gave that order. His own cabinet can't stand him. They're very happy with the 26th County Catholic rump state. They'll have nice pensions and all the rest of it, and their 5 families can grow and run the place for the next 100 years, as they have. Collins has a different vision. It's always been a Republican vision. And then, of course, there's the British, who are deeply unhappy with a man who managed to infiltrate British society from 1910, spy on their Minister for Finance, who's now their Prime Minister, take out anybody he wants, take down 2 of their intelligence networks using their own stuff against them, bring them to the negotiating table for the first time in 700 years, and give us a measure of freedom. And then 6 months into that freedom, take out their top general, Henry Wilson. This guy is out of control. And this is why I believe that Collins cannot be allowed to live. As John M. Regan have said, if there was no crisis after his death, it may well be because Collins was the crisis. And that's why he's taken out of bail on the law. And if you want to see any more about that, come to my show, because obviously I can't do the full 2.5 hours now, even though I can see you're thrilled. And of course, there's many suspects in this. We've been told through history that a man called Sonny O'Neill shot him, and all the rest of it. We were told it was a ricochet. We were told it could be Jock McPeak, who's manning the armoured car. We're told it could be Emmett Dalton, the man sitting next to him, the head of security, who singularly failed to secure him. I found out all sorts of things, like Sonny O'Neill never trained as a marksman and sniper, that he had a 40% damage in his right arm from World War I. There's no way he could have done it. I've also found out that Emmett Dalton was British intelligence before he met Michael Collins, and then was later asked by Bernard Montgomery to join the SAS in 1942. British intelligence after he met Michael Collins. The whole thing is quite shocking, and yet none of this is imparted to us, because we are treated, I have to say, like children by the establishment and by the historical establishment in the country. And so you can catch all that either online or at one of my shows. But the strangest thing, the most insidious thing, I think it's something that everybody needs to be conscious of as well, is that if you have an opinion that diverts from anybody else or diverges, and I'm not saying I'm in any full agreement with anybody in this room about anything, because I think everybody's an individual, and part of being sovereign is being a sovereign individual and being able to disagree and to agree to disagree. But the strangest thing that happens in this country is that we start to actually, despite saying that we like people, or despite saying that these people are great, we actually do an insidious campaign of defaming them. And no sooner did Collins die, but there's an instant campaign to defame the man. All of a sudden, this genius who manages to bring the Brits to the negotiating table after 12 years of survival, I mean survival in the most nefarious circumstances from 1910 to 1922, all of a sudden he's an idiot. All of a sudden, overnight, Michael Collins is so foolish, he gets himself killed. The Boston Post, that came out at 6 a.m. the very next morning, because they had all the information for some reason in every world newspaper, says this: he knew the danger. Time and again he was warned. Men begged him to shelter himself. He had contempt for danger. I don't think so. I think Collins is one of the great survivors of all time. How could he? The lies about Collins. Nobody knew what he looked like. This is a Pathé newsreel from 1919. British newsreel. British Pathé. If anybody in Ireland wanted to know what Michael Collins looked like, any of the authorities, they only had to look at this, which everybody saw. And it's Michael Collins signing Republican bonds, one of which is for sale today, and giving them to each member of the Dáil, who themselves are filmed and then smiling to the camera going, I've just bought my Dáil bond. This is one of the great lies about Michael Collins, that nobody knew what he looked like. He was a pimpernel and snuck around the city and could avoid capture. Of course he knew what he looked like. But this again is building a legend that's not true. Emmett Dalton, the head of security, that many people trust and like, and there's amazing footage of him, many people don't realise that he spent a lot of time defaming Michael Collins. He wrote an entire 5-page treatise saying he ran out by himself like a madman, he was drunk, he shot up at the hill, and then he said the worst thing of all. He said if Michael Collins had ever been in a scrap, he'd have known to keep his head down. Now, isn't that an awful thing to say? And to this day, you'll go on Facebook and you'll see every post, and there's people going, actually, Michael Collins was never in a fight, he never had a gun, he was just a desk jockey. That's funny. I seem to remember him being a captain in the Volunteers in 1916 over a week-long battle called the Easter Rising. He was aide-de-camp to Joseph Plunkett. He did rifle training from 1914 with the Irish Volunteers in London. You telling me he didn't know his way around a gun? And he'd never been in a scrap? Does everybody know that Michael Collins led the retreat down Moore Lane from the GPO, leading 500 people out of a burning building into a laneway that was completely surrounded by snipers? Not only was he in a crossfire, far worse than Béal na Bláth, which we doubt it might have even been a crossfire. Not only was he in the crossfire of the Irish Revolution. And he kept his head down. This again is nefarious stuff that we do, to try and defame the man.